Hey guys, Hawk here. So today we are going to be going over the Rapidstrike Talon conversion kit, and that lets you use half dart mags instead of the full length ones. So let's go ahead and jump right on into it and see what we have on the bench. So you're going to start with a Rapidstrike. You obviously want to disassemble this completely. You want to make sure you take the rail off, everything, so you're just left with the two halves. I have the 3D printed parts here. These are the beta versions, so the parts that you're going to print off are going to look slightly different, but they still will be very much the same thing. Basically, you have a few components that you're going to hot glue onto your blaster, like so. They only really go on one way. You also have these guys, which are spacers. They're gauge blocks, so that when you put it in between these two pieces, you want to push them together and then hot glue everything. That way, when you pull this out, you have a nice known gap. It doesn't really matter too much whether these are a little bit wonky. Mainly, they only rely on each other being square to themselves, and that's what this block is here to do. There's also some pieces for the rail. This piece is going to look a little bit different. It won't have this back tangent piece because you're not actually supposed to rest it on this back piece right here. You're supposed to glue this one on first. Then there will also be a gauge block for this piece here. And then you slide this forward and make sure that it's a nice even gap from where you want here. The only note that I have is make sure you're being real careful when you cut this, because you'll see how this fits together in a second where you want to be cutting, but it is kind of tight in there. So you do want to make sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing. I would recommend using your Dremel with a little bit of caution. This is a very quick tool to get rid of material, but it's also a very quick tool to go too far. My official recommendation is to get it within however close you are willing to get of your cut marks, and then start using different hand files to bring it into the final dimension. It's a little bit slower, but it ends up being a lot more accurate. You're also probably going to require a triangle file, and I know that kind of sucks, but this piece inside of here is actually really difficult to do without a triangle file to get into that small space. You could potentially 3D print something and then put sandpaper on there, but this is my official recommendation. And these kits are much easier with files anyway. I will have a link in the description to some files that I recommend, but pretty much any needle file is going to work for plastic. Once you have all of these things cut out, you're going to want to take some isopropyl alcohol, and you can basically just pool it on there. The more of a pool that you have, the easier it's going to be to take it off. But basically, you just wick in some isopropyl alcohol, and these parts should come right off without a problem. And then you glue them back together. Once you glue them back together, it's going to look something like this. You have these insert pieces. Again, this is a beta version. I did it so that there was a flap, and then you basically glue this up, and it actually works really well, and it's actually a better fit than this one. The only problem is it looks terrible. So I've decided to X that one and just go with the more traditional method here, but everything should fit really nice and snug. The only problem is this fits really nice and snug. So you actually want to push with quite a bit of force going this way. Just make sure that this is really seated in there nicely. It shouldn't really have too much of a gap anywhere. There really should be a pretty seamless fit. On the inside here, all of the ribs north of these two bottom lines need to go. At the very least, they need to be flat within these reference planes along this plane here. So the insert actually sits on these faces, so you want to make sure that they're flat with that. There is actually some ribbing, so you don't need it to be perfectly flat. You can have like a millimeter of travel there, but clipping them out should be sufficient enough. You don't need to do anything with these bottom ones, however. I have designed, I haven't actually used it yet, so I'm going to need to print it out and test it first, but I have a little piece that fits in here, just so that when you're putting these shell halves together, you want to make sure that these pieces line up. I don't think it's actually necessary because I did this without it, but this is actually a functioning slide, so you definitely want to make sure that this is lined up very well, because if you want to use your jam door, it's not going to work if you don't get that rail lined up. So once you have everything together, you're going to want to start tacking this with hot glue. The easiest way I found to do is to just take any sort of piece of metal and then use it as a heat sink, and then you can just, like, if you have any sort of quick abrupt movement, usually I just tap mine on the table and it breaks free. You don't have to do that, but I'm impatient. As you can see, the lines, mine aren't perfect, but once you get some, I would recommend methyl methacrylate based adhesive. It's a 2-part epoxy, not to be confused with just any old plastic bonder. For instance, JB Weld makes a plastic bonder, but they don't have that special methyl methacrylate adhesive in it. So it really doesn't make a nice clean bond the way that Devcon would. I know Loctite makes one, but basically if you look on the back in the warnings, it will say methyl methacrylate on there, and that's how you know you have the right stuff. You can use anything you want, but that's the stuff that I recommend. And if you see up here, you can see how these pieces are supposed to fit together, hopefully. The cut goes up this way, comes this way, and then up that way. So you want to kind of bit check it if you're not 100% sure where to cut this, just because this is probably the most confusing bit. And the cutting guides, I've tried to make them as clear as I can, but if you're not sure, cut less, and then you can always trim it back afterwards. I will say when you're fitting this together, it's going to want to hinge on this piece, and then this piece kind of flops around in the middle. You are going to want to try to align this correctly. This whole kit is slightly more difficult than the Strife cutting guide, so if you've done the Strife and you're looking for a bit more of a challenge, this one is definitely going to be up your alley. There's also the magazine tooth cutting guide. I heard a lot of people actually didn't even use this on the Strife, and they just cut it freehand, which is totally fine. You basically just take your little piece here and you just put it in there, and you can pretty easily see where this needs to be cut. There's one for each side. Should fit in there just like so, and then you want to go right into that line there. I just used a pair of Tamiya nippers to get a nice clean cut there. I didn't cut quite to it just because I like to bring in all of my lines with a file. However you can get that notch out, that's going to be how it is. It should be flush with this top bit of plastic here. It should be flush with the bottom ribs there. And you should have a nice working magazine catch. This is meant to be printed on this surface here so that it's nice and strong where you need it to be. All the layer lines, you might need to clean it up with a little bit of a file depending on what you're printing with. There's also a little bit of a ledge right here that I have purposefully put in there just to make this easier to print. You are going to want to take some sort of file and just remove that bit and bring it in so that it's more of a round peg. But other than that, these parts should be relatively easy to install. I also noticed something with the Talon magazines. The default pusher here is actually like the perfect width for it to be like a little bit of friction, and I didn't really like that. And it's going to be a separate file, but this is the Stiletto Pusher. And basically this just has a chamfer on each side so that when it extends, it's not interfering with the magazine. It's also a little bit extended. You still have this bit here so you can hit all of the switches that you need to switch. Other than that, this should be good to go. And I think that pretty much does it for this tutorial. If you want to see this entire, this one? No. If you want to see this one, this entire side done in real time, I have a link to one of my VODs on Twitch, basically just the recording of a Twitch stream where I actually went and did all of this on camera. I use a little bit of cheating. I have a bandsaw that I rip through most of this stuff with pretty quickly, but it's pretty intuitive with the Dremel. You just glue the guides on, you cut it clean in half just to get rid of the other half of it, and then you start bringing it in however you're comfortable with. My only recommendation really would be to finish up all of your lines with a hand file. Trust me, it makes a difference. Just try it. I do have plans for other kits. I want to make a flat top kit. I want to make an entire battery delete with a possible angled magazine well here, but I haven't 100% decided on anything yet. Besides, I've already started work on the flat top, but God only knows if that's going to keep my attention long enough. I just really wanted to get this out for you guys because I know a lot of people have been asking for it. This is a file set that you are going to have to buy. Unfortunately, I have chosen to spend quite a bit of money on this project, or these projects in general, and it makes designing these parts a lot easier, but there is some cost involved. And there's also some cost involved in just keeping the website up. So even just coming in for the traffic and downloading some free files on my website, adaline.com, that really, really helps a lot. So go ahead and check it out. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. You can leave a comment here on YouTube. You can hit me up on Discord if you have a more in-depth question. But other than that, I think we're good to go. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.